And his disciples came and besought him. So the disciples now get involved. The disciples come to him, and they beg him, saying, "Send her away, for she crieth after us." It's almost as if this woman runs up to Christ while him and his disciples are walking down the road. She says, "Son of David, I know who you are. Heal my daughter." He doesn't look at her. He keeps on walking. Maybe she stops walking. All of a sudden, maybe she begins to plead with the disciples, "Please, I need your master to heal my daughter. I need your master to cast out the demon out of my daughter. I need this." And the disciples go to Christ and they say, would you just get rid of her? They say, besought him, saying, "Send her away. She crieth after us." Now, we don't know how were the disciples saying it like this? Were they saying, just do the miracle. Just heal it real quick and let's go on. Now, no matter how you're going to look at this, it's almost going to seem uncompassionate. Because the disciples are saying, just heal her. Just do it, get it done, be on the way. Even if he would have done that, that wouldn't so much be compassion. Right? He wouldn't be doing it out of a compassionate heart. Or the disciples could be saying that, "Lord, you ignored her, so just send her away. She's back here, she's bothering us, she keeps following us, she keeps pleading with us to go and talk to you. Just send her away, just tell her to go." Jesus, he answers, and he says, "I am not sent but into the lost sheep of the house of Israel." Again, he shares his mission. He says, look, I ignored her because I'm sent to the children of Israel. I'm sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He says, I'm not sent to the Gentiles. That's not my mission. I'm not sent to go and minister and to heal the Gentiles. Now, we know he's done this. We know he's done this once before. But he tells the disciples, as he essentially says here, no. He says, no, I won't do it. I'm not sent to her. Again, odd, because where is he? He's in a Gentile land. Why would he travel to a Gentile land? Then came she. So we know, see this woman comes back into the scene. She shows back up, worships him. That means she bowed down before him. I imagine they're walking along the road, and the woman runs right back up again, right in front of all of them, gets down in front of Christ and begins to ask him. And what's she say? Saying, "Lord, help me." Now, if there was any moment that Christ would have compassion, you'd think it would be at this moment. A woman is down in front of him, and she's saying, "Lord, help me." She's at the end of her road. She's saying, I can't go any further. I need you. My daughter needs you. Yep. Yeah. Yep. 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 And she cries out, "Help me." Now we've seen Peter, this just happened to Peter not too long ago. Out on the water, remember? He's out in the water and he begins to sink and he says, "Save me." He says, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus reached forth and grabbed him up. But this woman comes, she says, "Lord, help me." And look at his response. But he answered and said, now imagine this. Just try to picture this in your mind. They're on an old dusty road, middle of the day. A woman is worshiping him, saying, "Lord, help me." We see her desperation. "Help me. My daughter needs you." And Jesus, he answers and says, "It is not meet." That means it's not fit or it's not right to take the children's bread and to cast it to dogs. Now, when you first read that, when you think about it, he's saying, you're not Israel. You're a dog. And it's not right for me to take what I came here to do, what I came here to do for the Israelites. It's not right for me to take that and to give it to a dog. Whoa. Whoa. That's rough, seemingly. That's rough. Why did he say this? We really don't know. But here's what I want you to see. And by the way, some people, you'll find that some scholars will say, you might find other translations, they say little dogs. So some say he's talking about not so much a feral street dog that's digging into the garbage, but some say, well, it's more of like a house pet that's eating from the table. Okay, that might be so, but even so, it's still a dog. She still calls her a dog. This was highly offensive. It's offensive today. It was highly offensive in that culture.
And they also refer to the Samaritans as dogs.
Sure, absolutely. But I don't think it was a respectful term. I think they.
No, I don't think so either.
But Jesus says to her, look, I can't do for you what you want me to do because you're a dog. That's what he says. I don't know why he says this. We don't know why. We can come up with a bunch of reasons and why. But here's what I want you to see. Look at how she responds to him. And she said, truth. If that was in today's culture, buddy, that would have been a huge, loud argument. But she says, truth, Lord. Yet the dogs eat of the crumbs which fall from the master's table. Here's what I want you to see, especially in the culture of America today, is this woman did not go to him with some kind of self-entitlement. And so many times we fall into this, and you see it all the time. I see it all the time. I hear it. I've heard many people say it. Well, Lord, the God has to save me. God has to do this for me. He owes me. He has to be fair. The moment we say God has to be fair, every one of us is going to hell. I heard somebody say one time, well, Lord has to offer everybody a chance. It was years ago. Somebody said, Lord has to give everybody a chance. Friend, you need to read about this Canaanite woman. Because Jesus says, I don't have to do anything for you. I don't have to do anything for you. Nothing. You're a dog. And she says, truth. She says, I am.
Yep.
But she says, Lord, if I could just have crumbs.
Come on. You got it. Amen. Bless you, brother.
We need to realize who we are.
Yes.
And I'm not talking about just as a Gentile people. I'm talking about as people who do not deserve salvation.
Amen.
And we cannot go to God and demand that he do something for us.
Amen.
We don't deserve it. We can't be entitled. We can't do that.
We're right on with this. A king's word is the last word he said. Period. When you're talking about a woman that has recognized him as the son of David, as the rightful king of Israel, she is not going to stand there and argue with him. She's going to say, of truth. That's a truth. So
I don't know.
that way, and I respect you enough to call you truth because I know you're the king.
The Pharisees and the Sadducees and the religious people of Jerusalem, they all argued with them.
Yes. Yeah.
They disagreed with them.
This is process of faith.
This is a process of faith. This is a process of a woman who says, I know what I am. I know I'm undeserving.
Amen.
I know that.
Yep.
But help me.
Yes. Process of faith. Amen.
We need to understand. And this goes not just for salvation, but for healing, for finances.
Amen.
Do not be self-entitled to think that God owes you anything.
Amen.
Sometimes I hear people say, well, you hear this from a lot of ministry leaders. You'll say, well, I need you to fund my ministry or it's going to go down. Let it go down. Do the will of God. If the will of God is for a ministry to rise above any other ministry, God will make it happen.
Amen.
If it's the fall, God will make it happen. But let us not get into a self-entitlement of that I must do this, that I deserve this, that this is owed to me.
Amen.
We're not owed anything.
Amen.
We're not owed anything.
That's right.
We're not owed health. We're not owed finances. We're not owed any of these. Salvation, nothing.
That's right.
But we do rest in the promises of God.
Amen.
We do rest in the promises of those that are His, that you won't be forsaken. You won't be forgotten. You won't go hungry. If He cares for the sparrow, He cares for you. We do have those promises.
That's right. Amen.
But let us not be entitled. Let us not do that. Let us not think that God owes us something.
Amen.
Well, if we could even go back to the 10 Commandments. What was the 10th commandment? Thou shalt not covet your neighbor's house, your neighbor's wife, his manservant, his maidservant, his ox, his donkey, or anything. Now, when we begin to become entitled, when we begin to think we deserve something, and then we fall, it's real easy to fall into this sin of this 10th commandment. It's real easy. We like to talk about how we're not murderers, or we're not adulterers, or we're not this, that, and the other, but, buddy, if we could just, I think the pastor mentioned it this past week, if we could put some of the things we think up on these TV screens, some of the times we've coveted. Come on now.
Come on, you're right. Come on.
I'm just as guilty as anybody in here. It's real easy to drive by something and think, I want that. And when we get into a place where we allow ourselves to be when we believe that we're entitled to something, and you look and you begin to covet after something, you begin to sin, not only against that person, but against God, in saying that you deserve to give me that like that person. You owe me that. If you give it to them, you should give it to me. I need that. I want that. Amen. And that is a dangerous place to be. Not so much dangerous because it might ruin a marriage. Not so much dangerous because it could ruin a relationship. But dangerous because it's going to put your faith in somewhere where you're depending upon something other than the promises of God. You're going to say, I'm looking for happiness instead of joy. You're going to say, I'm looking for a temporary contentment instead of an eternal one. And your faith is going to begin, if it's not dealt with, is going to begin to become shipwrecked. Because everything that you believe, when the storms come, you're going to look and say, you're going to look at materialistic things. You're going to look at temporary things that aren't important. All because you begin to covet. The only time the source of our strength ought to be looking to heaven. Every time we go through a battle, every time we go through a trial, every time we suffer, every time we're persecuted, no matter what we deal with, our eyes ought to be looking to heaven. I was in a calling hours on Friday. Somebody I know at work, they had a family member pass away, and so all of our department got together and went to the calling hours. Took a little break there and worked during lunch. And as we was walking up front and shaking hands, I was kind of looking at the body, and I was just thinking, he's here. And this was a wonderful man of the Lord. I mean, I was reading his obituary, and he had been a teacher of the Bible for 50 or 60 years. He had been some pastor. I mean, just done many, many wonderful ministry things. And I looked at the body, and I thought, he's here, but he's not here. Amen. We have something beyond this world. What's that verse? I think it's Colossians 2:7 maybe? That might not be right. Set your mind on things above. That's where our mind needs to be. Yes, sir. Our mind needs to be in heaven. Sometimes we've heard it said, don't be so heavenly minded where you're no earthly good. Well, that may be applied for a time, but I think today it's don't be so earthly minded you're no heavenly good. Amen. We need to be heavenly minded. If I'm not looking to heaven, I don't know how I'm going to get through this world. If I'm not constantly looking at what God has prepared for me, I don't know what else is going to get me through. Amen. Who cares what your neighbor has? Who cares what you think you should have? Look at what you do have, what is coming for you. And this woman, look at Jesus. We've seen 3 seemingly awful responses from Jesus. I don't want to call them awful. Let's call them abnormal. It's not what we're used to seeing. And yet she agrees with him what he says. She says, truth, Lord, yet the dogs eat of the crumbs which fall from their master's table. Then Jesus answered and said unto her, O woman, great is thy faith. Now, part of me thinks Jesus knew this all along. Part of me thinks this is why he was answering the way she was, and I think Jesus was getting her to where she is. And Jesus answers, he says, great is your faith.
Yep.
Now think about this. All of the religious people in Jerusalem, in Israel, in Judea, all these people that were brought up with the scriptures, all these people that went through Sabbath school and went through rabbi school, and they'd done great things, and they could recite the Old Testament, all these people. And Jesus is in the region of Tyre and Sidon, and a Canaanite woman comes and he says, how great is your faith? That's wonderful. The only other time we've seen him say something similar to this was also to a Gentile. Be it unto thee even as thou wilt. In other words, he says, I will do this. I will heal your daughter. And her daughter was made whole from that very hour. Amen. He healed her. Again, I think Brother Paul kind of mentioned this. I think it's the perseverance of prayer. What if this woman, when Christ didn't even say a word to her, what if she'd been like, well, that didn't work, I'm going to go find something else? Yeah. Or what if when he told her no, he goes, no, I'm not here for you. Well, it was worth a try. And she goes off. Or what if even the third time he says, look, I'm not giving what's meant for the children to the dogs. She, well, I'm offended at that. You're not who I thought you were. She walks off. But her faith she kept coming to him. She kept worshiping. Her perseverance and prayer kept bringing her back. She says, it was almost like Jacob, right? I'm not going to let you go unless you bless me. We don't stop. Even if you don't see a breakthrough, don't stop praying.
That's right. Amen.
Now, don't stop understanding that the Lord's will may be or may not to be what you're praying for also. But don't stop praying. Persevere.
There's something else that probably needs to be recognized here. For our own sakes, as we see people going through things like this, and they're continually going to God in prayer and stuff to get God's attention, but seemingly not having it. Okay? We should keep going and going and going. That way God can show his abilities through our faith,
Yeah.
because we know that he can.
Yeah, absolutely. Jesus departs from this, comes near into the Sea of Galilee, so again he travels back east, southeast to Galilee. Doesn't tell us exactly where he's at, but he's in that region there, probably on the west side of the coast of Galilee, or Sea of Galilee, and went up into a mountain and sat down there. Great multitudes followed him, having with them those that were lame, blind, dumb, that means mute, maimed. Most scholars take that to mean mutilated, literally missing a limb, and many others. Cast them down at Jesus' feet, and he heals them. So again, we see a miraculous account of him healing this great multitude of people. And some of these are crazy miracles, because think about a person that's missing an arm, and Jesus heals this person and gives them. That's what he says. And it's so much that the multitude wondered. They're amazed at what they see. When they saw the dumb to speak, the mute to speak, they see the maimed to be whole, the lame to walk, and the blind to see. He does this for a multitude. And they glorified the God of Israel. And then lastly here, we'll read down through this. We won't spend a lot of time here because this is almost an exact account of the 5,000. But after this happens, after he heals this multitude of people, healing the blind, the sick, the lame, the mute, then Jesus called his disciples unto him, meaning to himself, and said, I have compassion on the multitude, because they continue with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. And I will not send them away fasting, lest they faint in the way. And his disciples say unto him, think about this. His disciples say unto him, whence or from where should we have so much bread in the wilderness as to fill so great a multitude? What just happened, like literally weeks before this, maybe days before this? Did he not just feed the 5,000 with a little bit of bread and a little bit of fish with the exact same disciples? You would think one of them would be like, Lord, I got an idea. Why don't you do what you did last time? But instead they answer and they say, how are you going to do this? which I'll explain that here in a moment. And Jesus saith unto them, How many loaves have ye? And they said, 7, and a few little fish. And he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground. And he took the 7 loaves and the fishes, and gave thanks, and brake them, and gave to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. And they did all eat, and were filled. And they took up of the broken meat that was left 7 baskets full. And they that did eat were 4,000 men, beside women and children. And he sent away the multitude, and took ship, means he went or stepped into a ship, and came into the coast of Magdala. So again, there's really not much here. We obviously know what he is capable of. We know this is the Son of David. We know this is the Son of God, the Messiah. He is divine. He's 100% man, but 100% God. And he does wonderful miracles. And again, we see he feeds people with just a little bit. Now, I kind of wonder if maybe, again, we talk about the disciples. Why did they doubt? Why would this even be a question at this point? They've already seen him do this exact miracle for even more people. And yet they're saying, where are you going to get the bread from? It's like their memories were wiped clean of what had just happened. Kind of part of me thinks, well, maybe there was a lot of Gentiles there. Maybe a lot of Gentiles followed him. And so maybe then the disciples thought, well, if he wasn't going to do that miracle for that Canaanite woman, maybe he's also not going to do that for these people. And so therefore, maybe they're thinking, maybe he's going to find a different way. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. All I know is, again, you would think somebody would stand up and be like, do what you did last time. But no, they say, how are you going to do this? Jesus says, how many loaves do you have? They said 7 and a little fish. He commands them to sit down. Takes the 7 loaves, takes the fish. He breaks them, asks God thanks for them. And he gave to his disciples, and his disciples give to the multitude. They did all eat. They were all filled. And then they took over the leftovers, and they put it in 7 baskets full. Again, to recite, and I'm not going to go over it all the way, but to recite from the last time we've seen this miracle, we're not to be wasteful with what God gives us. And they that did eat were 4,000 men, beside women and children. And he sent away the multitudes, and took ship, and came into the coast of Magdala. Now, Magdala is just a little bit south of where they're at on the Sea of Galilee. But we'll stop there for this morning, and we'll pick up chapter 16 again next week when he's in Magdala. And again, we're going to see a very similar account here, because we've already seen Jesus say this. Sadducees and Pharisees are going to come to him, and they're going to say, we want to see a sign. And he's going to say, an evil and adulterous generation seeketh a sign. He goes, but the sign's already been given you, and that's the sign of Jonah. Well, we already saw that back in Matthew chapter 12. But there is a couple differences that we'll look at. But we'll look at that next week. And then, of course, we'll get into, again, Matthew 16 is one of my favorite chapters. We're going to get into Caesarea Philippi, where Peter is going to make the wonderful announcement. He's going to say, proclaim God as the Son of God. And that's wonderful, because you've never really, we've seen him called Son of David. We've seen all these kind of like hidden meaning names. But Peter is literally going to call him the Son of God. So it might be a couple weeks before we get there, but we'll look at that next week in Matthew chapter 16.